Welcome to Thinktown's channel. I analyzed 5 years of Score-5 papers, and here's the pattern. So one student called 12 Alzheimer's care facilities in Connecticut and asked what they were feeding their patients. Another one raised 540 mealworms, fed them calcium supplements, and measured their iron content. Someone else went through every cosmetic ad in Vogue from 1950 to 2019, every single one. All three got a 5 on AP research. Completely different topics, completely different methods. So I kept asking myself, what is actually the same here? Because something clearly is. Turns out 5 things. So that's what this video is about, 5 moves. Let's get into it. Pattern 1. The first one is about how you set up your research question. And most students get this wrong in a really specific way. What I usually see is something like, here is the big important problem, here are some statistics, here's my question. So the topic gets introduced and then the question just pops up. The Score-5 don't do that. They zoom in and they let you watch them do it. The 2020 Alzheimer's paper starts with the global burden of dementia. Then it narrows to dietary interventions, then to the Mediterranean diet specifically, then to Connecticut facilities, because that's what the student could actually access. By the time the research question shows up, you are not surprised by it. You basically already arrived there yourself. The 2025 Coffee Grounds paper does the same thing. Global dye pollution problem, low-cost filtration alternatives, carbon-based absorbents. Spend coffee grounds. Each step justified with a citation. The question I give students is, when your reader hits your research question, do they think, interesting choice? Or do they think, yeah, obviously, what else would you study? Score-5 papers get the second reaction every time. Second pattern, the gap in the literature is shown, not told. Students love to write, limited research exists on this topic. I've read this sentence like hundreds of times at this point. It's almost never followed by actual proof. What Score-5 papers do instead is to find 2 bodies of literature that exist separately, and then point to the exact same space between them. The mealworm paper is the cleanest example I've ever seen. Calcium inhibiting iron absorption in mammals, studied. Insect iron metabolism, studied. But here is the thing, insect iron systems are genetically distinct from mammalian ones, so you can't just assume calcium behaves the same way. The middle space, calcium's effect specifically in the insect system, that's the gap. And the student builds to it piece by piece, using the literature itself as evidence that the question hasn't been answered. The 2018 Interment Camp paper does something similar historically. Japanese garden design, documented. World War II internment, extensively documented. But the meaning of the gardens that inmates built inside Manzanar, treated seriously as primary sources? That specific question had a real absence of the scholarship. The student doesn't just claim it. She maps what exists and shows you where the hole is. Your literature review isn't just a tour of the existing research, it's an argument that one particular question has been left unanswered. Third pattern, every method choice has a reason. This is where I see the biggest gap between Score-3 and Score-5 papers. A Score-3 methods section reads like a recipe. Here is what I did, here are the steps, here is the procedure. So perfectly clear, perfectly unremarkable. Score-5 methods sections read like a defense. So why these groups and not different ones? Why 48 hours and not 24? Why spectrophometry given its known limitations with this kind of sample? The 2024 Running Shoe paper, someone tested Nike Vaporfly versus Adidas Adizero over 100 miles, justifies why a midfoot striker, why those 2 specific models, why the millage, why the measurement approach. The 2023 AAPI curriculum paper explains why 2 separate content analyses were necessary before any curriculum design could happen, and why level 3 transformational integration was the right target and not level 2. The rubric uses the word defend, not describe. Defend. That's a real difference. Describing tells me what you did. Defending tells me why this and not something else. Honestly, the easiest fix is just to go through your methods section and after every decision, ask yourself, why not the obvious alternative? If you don't have an answer, that's a gap. Fourth pattern, and this is the one that separates a lot of 4s from 5s, limitations that actually do work. Every student writes a limitation section. Most of them read like apologies. Small sample size, couldn't control all variables, equipment wasn't perfect. That's fine, but it's not a 5. What the Score-5 papers do is to use a limitation to think harder. The Vogue Beauty Standards paper acknowledges that 1 random issue per year is a thin sample, and then uses that to sketch out exactly what a more complete study would look like. and what it could answer that this one couldn't. The mealworm paper handles this even more impressively. The iron content data came back with no statistical significance. A weaker paper stops there and says, equipment limitations. The student instead asks, why do the iron content data and the weight gain data point in different directions? She then goes into the literature on calcium's effects on fat metabolism in both mammals and insects and proposes two competing explanations for the pattern. That section reads more like a discovery than a disclaimer. That's the difference. Last one, the paper knows who it's talking to. Not in a vague, this paper contributes to the field way. Specifically, who is making a decision and what does the research help them decide? The 2022 lighting design paper produces an actual usable lighting plan for future high school productions. The 2023 AAPI curriculum paper produces a real curriculum outline. The coffee grounds paper tells industrial wastewater researchers something concrete. Non-activated carbon works under these conditions, which opens a different avenue than the activated carbon research they've been pursuing. Even the more analytical papers do this. The 2016 Supreme Court paper ends with a direct implication for how the court might think about which cases to accept for public hearings. The Big Hero 6 film analysis gives the industry something to actually act on, specific structural problems in how hybrid world narratives get built. When I read a paper that ends with, future research should further investigate this topic, I know the student hasn't finished the thinking yet. The question isn't what should be studied next. It's who needs this and what do they do with it. Years of Score-5 papers, 10 different subject areas, 5 patterns that keep showing up. A question that lands as inevitable. A gap that's demonstrated in the literature, not claimed. Methods that are defended, not just described. Limitations that open up the argument instead of shrinking it. And a clear sense of who the research is actually for. The topics generally don't matter. I've seen 5s in lighting design and 5s in insect biology and 5s in Supreme Court history. What they share is the thinking underneath. Next video, I'm going to deep on the literature review specifically because the gap building piece is where most papers actually lose the points. If that's useful, subscribe and I'll see you there.